In this unit, we will begin a deep examination into the way relational databases are used and designed. Designing a database requires to examine the data needs of our organization and the ways in which the business processes handle this data. This will determine our database's structure. The main part in the design of a database is the creation of what is known as a data model. This step usually consists of a lot of brainstorming and culminates in a graphical representation of our entities and records that we can then use to create our database schema. Since the database is quite literally the base on which the rest of the applications for organization are built, it's worthwhile to put in the effort to create a good data model. Changing the data model as you go along is possible, but tends to require a lot of work, especially in the case of relational databases, which have a well-defined rigid structure or schema, as compared to NoSQL databases. A data model for your application will need to include or model all the entities that your application intends to use and all the relationships between them. There are several ways to create such a model, and the best known one is the entity relationship diagram. The entity relationship, or ER model, is a specific structured way of data modeling for relational databases. As we previously mentioned, an entity is any independent thing, physical or logical, which persists over time and can be uniquely identified. Examples of entities are cities, users, and products. Entities generally have attributes corresponding to fields in records. In our example, a city entity might have a name attribute and a population attribute. A relation in the ER model is a well-defined conceptual connection between two entities, usually stated through a predicate verb. Examples of such relationship are user lives in city or user purchased product. Note that in some cases, relationships are important enough to have attributes of their own and or require unique identification. For example, perhaps it's not enough to know that a user purchased a product, but we must know the details of that purchase. In this case, we should model purchase as an entity by itself, which would have relationships purchase made by user and purchase consisted of item, in addition to attributes such as date or sum. These are the kind of considerations that make ER modeling both hard and valuable. It is much better to make these distinctions during the early design phase of a new system rather than late during software development. That's because all of the code we'd write for creating a system would rely on that structure. And changing that structure would require rewriting of many lines of code. Unless your database is very simple and you already have an excellent understanding of your domain, you would usually want to manage the process of designing your database as a multi-phase project. This means starting from a high-level design, and only after you are reasonably certain that it's a good design, often including getting consensus from other team members and stakeholders, you move on to work on a more concrete design. The general recommendation is to split the work into the following three design phases. Conceptual, the highest level phase where we map out the main entities, relationships, and attributes without a regard to storing them in the database yet. Logical, in this phase, we decide which entities and relationships will actually be stored in a relational database and associate each with a table and their attributes with columns in those tables. And finally, the physical, the lowest level phase in which we decide how exactly each of those tables should be stored in a computer. This phase relies on familiarity with the specific DBMS we choose to use.